At the beginning of the movie, we see the childhood stories of two kids, a boy named Dylan and a girl named Becky. Becky is at an ice skating rink, while Dylan is in school. As Becky starts skating, she suddenly sees Dylan's classroom in front of her, and at the same time, Dylan sees the ice skating scene as if he is there. Becky, feeling as if she is in the classroom, lets go of her skating board, while Dylan sees a tree appear before him and starts shaking while holding onto his bench. As Becky crashes into the tree, Dylan instinctively turns his board and both of them fall to the side. Due to the impact, they both lose consciousness. Becky escapes from the accident with minor injuries, and soon, people rush over to help her. The scene then cuts, and we jump forward a few years. The kids have now grown up. Dylan has become a criminal who has just been released from prison. He is given strict instructions not to leave the city, and now works at a car wash. On the other hand, Becky is married to a well-respected doctor named Philip. The two of them are preparing to attend a party. However, from Philip's behavior, it becomes clear that he is very controlling over Becky. He dictates how she should dress, behave at the party, and even how she should socialize with the trustees' wives. Becky, however, is visibly uncomfortable with all of this, as she dislikes being controlled in this way. At the same time, we see Dylan at a bar having some drinks. While playing pool, he gets into a fight with another man, who suddenly strikes him on the head with a stick, causing him to fall to the ground. Meanwhile, on the other side, Becky, who is sitting at the party, suddenly falls from her chair and experiences a severe headache, as if she had been hit as well. This means that whatever happens to Dylan physically also affects Becky, showing that their mysterious connection has an incredible range. Philip, embarrassed by Becky's condition in front of everyone, quickly helps her up. The next morning, Dylan's phone rings and he realizes that he is running late for work. He rushes to his car to get to his job. Meanwhile, Becky goes to a store to buy some things, including undergarments. As she picks them up, Dylan suddenly finds himself holding women's lingerie in his hands, leaving him utterly confused. At the same time, Becky sees Dylan's car outside the shop. Just then, another vehicle suddenly appears in front of Dylan's car. Becky instinctively shouts, "Look out!" The shocking part is that Dylan hears her voice clearly, even though she is nowhere near him. Confused, Dylan says, "What?" Now, both of them can hear each other's voices in their heads, leaving them completely baffled. Becky, terrified by this strange occurrence, rushes out of the shop. Dylan, equally disturbed, stops his car and takes a moment to process what just happened. Eventually, both of them start talking, trying to make sense of the situation. Dylan asks, "Can you hear me?" Becky replies, "Yes." Dylan, struggling to understand, asks, "But how is this happening? How can you be in my mind?" Up until now, they had both assumed they were just hearing voices from within themselves. However, after some time, they come to the realization that the voices they hear belong to an actual person in a different location. Becky is in New Hampshire, while Dylan is in Mexico. At that moment, snow is falling in New Hampshire. Dylan suddenly starts feeling cold despite being in a much warmer place. This convinces him that their connection is real. Finally, they introduce themselves to each other and discover that they are living in different time zones. Becky is 2 hours ahead of Dylan, and both decide to reconnect later that night. After dinner, Becky calls Dylan, and without overthinking, they start talking again. They learn more about each other, using their telepathic abilities to see into each other's homes and share past experiences. Becky recalls the first time Dylan went to jail. At that time, she thought it was just a nightmare. Then, they discuss a childhood incident where Becky fell from an ice railing and had to get 20 stitches. They are both shocked to realize that their connection has existed since childhood, unknowingly sharing each other's highs and lows. However, back then, they didn't understand that the visions they were having were of a real person. Before ending their conversation, they agree to talk again later and jokingly say they'll disconnect their high-range Wi-Fi. The next morning, they talk again, and Dylan comes up with an idea. He asks Becky to stand in front of a mirror so they can finally see each other. After some hesitation, Becky agrees, and for the first time, Dylan can see her reflection. Amazed, he says, "You're beautiful." Becky, Curious, asks Dylan to do the same, and when she sees his face, she likes what she sees too. This moment deepens their bond, as they now have someone they can truly confide in. From that day on, they talk to each other daily. However, to outsiders, it looks like they're talking to themselves, making them seem crazy. Philip also begins to notice that Becky is acting distant and behaving strangely. One night, Dylan goes to a bar and notices a girl named Donna. Since Becky can also see everything through his eyes, she playfully encourages him to ask her out. Dylan hesitates, but eventually, Donna approaches him, and he nervously asks her on a date. She immediately agrees, and they plan to meet at his house on Thursday. However, that same night, Becky is supposed to attend a fundraiser party with Philip. She asks Dylan to reschedule his date, but he refuses, saying, "This is my date and I'll go alone." On Thursday night, Becky is at the fundraiser party, but she's completely uninterested. An old man tries to flirt with her, but she isn't paying attention. Her focus is on Dylan's date. Meanwhile, at Dylan's house, Donna arrives and he offers her red wine. However, Donna prefers beer, which makes Dylan a bit uncomfortable. He's clearly inexperienced when it comes to dating. Then, while making barbecue sauce, Dylan accidentally starts a small fire in the kitchen. At the exact same moment, Becky, who sees everything through his eyes, panics and suddenly throws a glass of wine at the party, screaming in fear. Everyone stares at her, shocked. Realizing what she's done, Becky is embarrassed, especially since Philip had repeatedly told her how to behave at the event. She quickly apologizes and rushes to the washroom to compose herself. Back at Dylan's house, the date is completely ruined. Furious, Dylan storms into his room and starts arguing with Becky. "You ruined my date. Just go away," he yells. Becky refuses, saying, "I won't." In frustration, Dylan starts slapping himself. Since their connection is so strong, Becky feels the pain too. Donna, who walks into the room at that moment, sees Dylan slapping himself and immediately assumes he's crazy. Horrified, she runs out of the house, leaving Dylan frustrated and upset. Meanwhile, after returning from the party, Philip scolds Becky for causing a scene. He's furious that she spilled wine on a respected doctor and didn't even apologize. Becky tries to explain, saying, "That so-called respected asshole was flirting with me." But Philip, obsessed with his social status and reputation, refuses to listen or acknowledge her feelings. Later that night, Becky reconnects with Dylan and apologizes for ruining his date. Dylan sighs and says, "It's okay. Honestly, the date wasn't going well anyway." The next day, while Philip is at a meeting, Becky drinks some wine and talks to Dylan again. They discuss their families, with Becky revealing that she was once terrified of her family and left Dylan to escape his controlling mother and older brother. They both become emotional, and Dylan confesses that he started developing feelings for her despite knowing she's married. He enjoys spending time with her. Hearing this, Becky stands in front of a mirror, begins undressing, and Dylan, losing control, says, "I wish you weren't so beautiful." Becky then lies down on the bed and says, "I want to know how much you like me and what you're feeling." She starts touching herself, and Dylan feels the same way. They both start touching each other and become telepathically intimate. The next scene shows Becky in a drawing class, still talking to Dylan, and a lady, who happens to be Philip's friend's wife, notices her speaking to herself. The lady finds it strange and suspects that either Becky's mental state is unstable or she's having an affair. After class, the woman confronts Becky, who denies having an affair, but the woman remains suspicious. She goes to Philip and tells him that Becky is seeing someone else, which makes Philip angry and upset. Later, Becky goes to the same place where she had fallen at the beginning of the movie and tells Dylan about the depression she experienced in college, which led to her being hospitalized for 3 months. She says Philip didn't care for her there, and although he's her husband, she can't betray him. She tells Dylan to forget her. Dylan, unwilling to let go, says that both of them are in trouble and that they need to separate. Becky then cuts off their telepathic connection. Dylan, feeling confused, heads to a bar, but then he realizes something and sees Becky being taken away by some people. She's locked in a hospital cell by Philip, who believes that her mental condition is deteriorating. He hopes that locking her up for a couple of months will help her recover. Becky realizes she doesn't love Philip and that Dylan truly understands her. Dylan, Determined to save her, sells his truck, gathers money, and heads to New Hampshire. He contacts Becky on the plane, tells her not to take any more medicine, and asks for her location. After getting off the plane, Dylan rents a car but soon grows suspicious of the airport security, knowing that, as a criminal, he's not supposed to leave the city. He sneaks out, steals a car, and drives to the hospital. With Becky's guidance, he sneaks into the hospital, teaches her how to open the lock to her room, and she succeeds on the first try. It's clear they're meant to be together. Becky steals a jacket from someone and leaves the hospital, but when she sees Philip near the entrance, doing paperwork, she becomes scared. Dylan encourages her to keep moving. She walks past Philip, but he spots her and tries to stop her. In a moment of courage, Becky punches him in the face and runs. Hospital security chases after her, and the police are after Dylan. Dylan reaches Becky, and they both hear the sound of a train approaching. Excited, Dylan tells her to run towards it. The closer they get to each other, the faster their hearts beat. Eventually, they reach the train. As time seems to slow, Becky sees Dylan on the other side. Dylan urges her to run and catch the train. They race to get on the same train, and Dylan gets on first. Becky gets stuck and begins to fall, but Dylan pulls her up. For the first time, they face each other, and Becky touches him. They kiss passionately, turning their telepathic connection into a real one. The movie ends here.